Hey friends, welcome back to the podcast with me, Jonathan Puddle. This is episode 104. Huge thanks to everyone who listened and shared last week's episode, The Great Sex Rescue with Sheila Ray Gregoire and Rebecca Lindenbach. I have had amazing responses to that show. Some really heartbreaking responses for sure, but definitely an encouragement that this is an important topic and people need to hear more about the harm that has been done to people as a result of some really bad evangelical messages surrounding sex and marriage. Thank you to everyone who joined my Patreon too, so you could listen to the B-side on that one, and I will share some of the comments I received at the end of this show. This week, though, my guest is Melinda Estabrooks. Melinda is a Canadian television show host, conference speaker, and editor of the new book, Always Know. For those of you who don't know Melinda, her career in Canadian broadcast, TV, and radio spans over 20 years. She's someone that I've known about for quite a while. We've interacted and met at industry events over the years, but it was a real pleasure to finally sit down with her, virtually have her on the show. She shared her story of being abandoned as a baby, being adopted by a Canadian family, experienced racism in the 80s, growing up in Canada, developing her career, facing major depression, even divorce, while in a very public Christian ministry. If you've ever felt like God doesn't see you, or that the world is ignoring you, then I believe Melinda's story is going to be an encouragement for you today. Here we go. Melinda, I'm excited to welcome you to the show today. This is cool. I was really honored to be on a panel on your show. I did not take that lightly. That was really special for me personally. And so to get to return the favor, I'm so glad to do it. Welcome.
Well, I'm excited to be here. And Jonathan, like I said to you just earlier, can I say this? Out of any of the podcasts and interviews, yours was the one I was really looking forward to. So I'm really excited to be here and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Oh, that's very kind. I got to say, just for the listener context, you've got a book that's just come out that you've brought together all these stories from folks who've been on your show. I was honored to be included. I didn't realize I was the second. I got my copy with a lovely inscription from you, thank you. And I flip it open and my story is the second story. And I'm like, whoa, it's right there. And then of course I'm like, oh man, I wrote this for a blog. And my author brain is going like, is all of this context? I'm like, okay, it's not my responsibility.
Right. Let it go.
It's not my product. But I really, really enjoyed the launch party for this book and hearing from all these different people who you've built relationship with over the years and the way that you are pushing forward conversations around diversity, around just like a plurality of experiences of life within the Christian Canadian media space is really, really important. And you're doing that so well. And I'm just so glad for that and relieved. So I just would love to hear today a lot more of your own story and kind of why these things are passions for you, why they're important in your mind. I mean, I totally agree with you that they're important. And so I'll do some of the devil's advocate interview work as you know, but I'm just so thrilled that you're doing it. And I'd love for you to introduce yourself a bit and unpack your journey and what brought you here.
Wow, it's a lot. But thank you for, the space and platform to share. So, I mean, if you want to start right from the beginning, I always start with my story about being adopted. And, in the backstory of that, my birth mom, Dory, was a young teenager. And, unfortunately, got pregnant in a really difficult situation with someone she trusted and had a decision on what she should do as a young teenager with a baby. And thankful that and this is maybe the start of it, thankful that a girlfriend had the courage to say, hey, listen, I can support you, I can help you, I'll be with you. And I know this place, a hospital and a place called the Abiertas House of Friendship outside of Manila in Quezon City, where you can leave your baby. And that baby was me. So at just under 5 pounds, I'm left at this, you know, basically orphanage slash place where unwed mothers could go and leave their babies. And a beautiful story that, my adopted parents, Paul and Diane, they were living in London, Ontario. I mean, Jonathan, really living the Canadian dream. My dad was in television and a teacher. My mom was a school teacher. They literally lived in a home with a white picket fence. They had 2 kids. Everything's going fantastic, involved in church community. And my parents went down to Urbana, which is a big missions conference in the United States. Some people know about it, some people don't. And my dad will say this. He was walking down the hallway and a guy steps out from one of the booths, if you've ever been to one of those kind of conferences. And he said, this is Far East Broadcasting Company, and we're looking for people to share the gospel, the good news, via radio, transmitter radio, because at that point, obviously, there was no internet in this way, and television, to areas that are, inaccessible, into like jungles, and in remote places in Southeast Asia. Now, it's crazy, but my dad will tell you, like, it was like, that was it. It was like
Wow.
God spoke, said, you're doing this. Now, they had a lot of opposition from the church, from their family. Like, why would you leave the comforts of Canada and go in the late 60s, early 70s to a country that they kept calling China? Because everything in Asia at that time, Jonathan, was China. It wasn't the Philippines. And they kept calling it like the Philippians people. Are you going to the Philippians? Because nobody had context to the Philippines then. And they went. And I am thankful. One of the threads and themes of my life is that your choices matter. Your decisions matter. Because if my parents had not decided that, had listened to people saying, no, that's so dangerous, don't do it, it's so unpredictable, we have no idea what's happening there, I would not be here today. That's just the reality. And when, my parents went overseas, they saw the great need of care for girls, at that time, and still in this world. And this time, Jonathan, girls are being discarded, and they witnessed and saw in the news, like girls being thrown into rivers, being discarded in plastic bags by the roadside. And, their heart was broken. They could never seen such poverty and desperation in their life, leaving Canada to the Philippines at that time. And then my mom had a miscarriage, which is, a devastating loss. And they've told me my dad and mom looked at each other and said, how can we take this loss and grief and turn it into something good? And at that point, a friend told my mom about the Obieritis House of Friendship and said, I think you need to check it out. And in this supernatural, cosmic, incredible clash of things, I ended up there at the time. Paul and Diane wanted to adopt. They got a call and the woman said, there's a package for you. A baby just came in and it's a little girl, 4.5 pounds. And I think this is the girl for you. And Jonathan, that's really how it happened. All the pieces of decisions of people to ensure that I am here. It makes me quite emotional that that's what it took in so many levels. And so I was adopted and, became a Canadian citizen, and they named me Melinda, which is my name before that was just baby. It was baby adoration based off of my birth mother, Dory. So I had no name. And that's even significant for me about name and being given a name. And so, yeah, I mean, that part of adoption is a big part of my story. And in that later on, just, being adopted into sort of God's family. And maybe, I mean, as I'm chatting with you, maybe that's part of why my heart is so open for including people. It's almost like adopting them into community, bringing them in to experience new family and new experiences. So, yeah, I was adopted. Yeah. Actually, that's, I think, the first time I processed that in that way, because I think adoption is a beautiful picture of what God does with us as well. And also, I think adoption honors the decisions of people. Like, I say every time, like, yes, I thank Paul and Diane for adopting me, but I thank Dory for the courage it took as a young woman to the decisions that she made. To have me, to keep me, to then, give me up. And Jonathan, this is an incredible story, but years later, I said to my parents, And I think as any adopted child, you want to know where you came from. I mean, I'm a Filipino brown child. My mom is Ukrainian. My dad comes kind of from the New Brunswick way, English. My sister and brother, blonde and brown haired, green eyes. So I think for someone like that's been internationally adopted, that's something pretty significant. Like, where did I come from? Blood connection. So when I hit 30, I, went to my parents and said, I think I need to find her. I need to find my birth mom. And my dad was like, there's three options, Mal. She's either passed away, she doesn't want to see you, or she will see you. And through prayer and hiring 7 men, through pastors we knew in the Philippines, they looked for her for 7 months and they found her. It's incredible story. Actually, CBC, which is our national news station here in Canada, did a whole show on my story. They came to my home. We sent up. It's an incredible Canadian story, and so we found her. I flew down to the Philippines with my dad, and it was probably one of the most spiritually enriching. Again, the supernatural part of God in the room. And she walked in the room, and all I could say, Jonathan, was, thank you. And she held my hand, face, and she said that the day that she gave me up, she's prayed for me every single day, and that I would be okay, and that I would get opportunities that she couldn't give me. It's like, and my dad, everybody was crying, like the interpreter's crying, my dad's crying, and the story is incredible. Like, how we found her was, they located, just from a little small record, her sister. And at that time, in the mountain of trash barrio in Manila, I don't know how it's even possible. Again, it's always as a God story. And they found Clarita, who, this is interesting, Jonathan said, yeah, our sister Dory left like 30 years ago. We don't know what happened to her. We don't even know if she's alive, but something happened in her life that made her leave. And we found out later that was me. She was ashamed. She was scared that, she would get in trouble. When she moved from southern Philippines to Manila, her parents told her, don't ever get in trouble. Don't dishonor our name, or we will essentially kill you. We will banish you, because, our name is important. So for a young girl at that time to get pregnant would be a huge dishonoring. So her parents never knew about me. Clarita found her, and somehow through, just incredible connections, we found a pastor that lived in southern Philippines, in Makati, in Aklan province, who somehow knew of a farmer that kind of had the name. They found her, Jonathan, like, honestly, it was like water buffalo, bicycle, found her in a nipa hut in the middle of a field, knocked on the door, said, are you, Dory, Adaracia, and Bakatin? She goes, why? And she said, well, we have your sister you haven't talked to in 30 years on a cell phone. Talk to her. I mean, this is how incredible it was. They talked, they cried. And Clarita said, we've been wondering if you were alive. This is a big reunion, but there's somebody else that's looking for you. And it's the baby you gave up 30 years ago. I wish I was in that nipa hut. The pastor who was there said she fell to the floor crying. And we met. It was incredible. It was, and my dad, I think the biggest thing for me, I'm so emotional right now. My dad, I know my dad bent down when she saw, Dory's like 4'7", and my dad's like this big burly guy. And he bent down to Dory and he said, thank you for giving me the most amazing daughter. And she looked up at my dad through the interpreter and said, thank you for taking care of her. And that, I think, really is probably why I do what I do, the story, family connection, identity. Jonathan, I think that's why I'm so passionate about this inclusion and bringing people together and, sharing the story. It's an incredible. Later on in 2015, when Typhoon Haiyan happened, it was one of the worst typhoons to hit Southern Asia and the Philippines. Thousands of people died and are still missing. Her house was destroyed. Tons of people in her community died. She was saved in a miraculous way. So we decided to rally Canadians and people to raise money through GoFundMe to build a home. And so we built her this crazy brick home with a piggery and a garden and 2 bedrooms with a door and a kitchen and tiled floors. We went down again, my dad and I. We blessed it. We prayed over it. We cried. I met my extended family. I have 6 half brothers and sisters that for the first time I saw siblings that kind of looked like me.
Wow.
And I realized, Jonathan, as I stood there, it's not like I'm thankful that I wasn't in that place. I mean, you, as an adopted child, when you look at that, I never want people to say, oh, I'm so glad I got brought out of that. I mean, there are moments where it's like, it was hard, but I also know that it might've been hard, but God would have been with me and things would have been different. So I never want to discount or belittle or say that was a worse situation than mine. In that, who knows, what could have happened. But I just love the story. When we got there, she had painted a big Canadian maple leaf on the door to thank Canadians. It's wild. We asked her what the best thing of the house was. And aside from I'd given her Benjamin Moore paint colors for the house, like, cloud white and stuff. And she decided to go with yellow and pink. Hey, that's her prerogative. A woman knows what a woman wants, so her house is bright yellow and pink. And I think that's really symbolic of this light on the hill, because she was the poorest and the least of. And when we built her the home, she was elevated in her community, and her home has become a meeting place for women and men to meet, because it's a beautiful space with a garden and whatnot. But Jonathan, the amazing thing was, we asked, out of everything, what was the best part of this house? And there's a beautiful thing. She's got a toilet and electricity. She didn't have any of those things. And she looked at us and she said, a door to my bedroom. And I said, pardon? She said, all my life I've slept in an open room with all my kids sharing one space. And for me at 50 to finally have a door to a bedroom, my space, my own safe sanctuary, that's the best thing. And I think that's it. These little moments and these little parts of a story. And anyway, so it was a wonderful experience. We're still, in touch. It's difficult because she doesn't speak English. She's very far away. So we've had to, kind of work with a pastor and different things. But, that thread of my story is a really redemptive story. She, they wanted to know about us. And so when I shared about, me following Jesus and my parents, they're very intrigued. And years later, they told me that they decided to start going to church and kind of discover Jesus. I mean, they, I believe they were Jehovah's Witness. And so in the Philippines, there's a lot of Jehovah's Witness and Catholic and, but they had never really understood Jesus as the person. So when I got to share about my own journey, it was really neat. And so they're going to church and on their own personal journey, but it's, it's a beautiful thread of the story in my own life.
Thank you for sharing that. That is so rich.
I know there's a lot there, but it's a beautiful, I think, picture of God. I say this all the time. I say to the least of these, like I said this to her, I said, God never forgot you, Dory, right? Like every prayer, no matter who you were praying to, you didn't even know, you said God or whoever. She didn't even know who that was. I said, that's God who heard you. No matter who, you literally, she was like, I was just praying. And I said, and he heard you. And he heard you. And it's a miracle. But I believe, Dory, with all my heart, that for some reason, for your story, God was like, I'm going to ensure that Dory and her family know that they are seen, heard, and loved, that they, like, essentially that's what it was. And I think that's part of the seen, see, hear, and love, but that he cares for the least of these. She was the least, a farmer's wife with a deep-rooted secret about me, with 6 kids, poor, impoverished. Her husband eventually died because he had pneumonia and they couldn't afford $7 worth of antibiotics. Like the least of these. And then we come in and we're like, here's a home, here's a piggery, here's a garden, here's a tiled floor. And I think it was just beautiful for us to participate in lavishing the gifts to a woman that has had a difficult life. But I believe that's the picture, of God. So yeah, that's part of this. That's just one part of the story, Jonathan.
Oh, it's incredible.
Yeah.
I flipped open the book and saw your dedication at the beginning to all the young women who believe they are not seen, heard, or loved. And I thought, there's a story behind that. And that's not to reduce all of your life to just one
Mhm.
thread, as you said, but it really does feel like, yeah, like what you just kind of said earlier, that it's like you have been reaching out to pull people in, to give them this gift of being seen, of being able to tell their story, of redeeming other people's pain.
Mhm.
And that's just sacred work.
Thanks. It's interesting. The adoption is one level. I think after I grew up in the Philippines and Singapore. And so my life was rich with diversity and, multiculturalism and experiences. We traveled all over the world. I mean, I love when people, bring their family overseas to have their, kids experience it because it was rich for us. I mean, our friends were from the Middle East, Middle East and Muslim and Japanese and Buddhist. Like we had a range of friends and experiences and cultures and food. And I think that was the most beautiful thing of our childhood. And when my dad got transferred, because he was working with Far East Broadcasting Company, which brought him to the Philippines, and then he transferred work to Open Doors with Brother Andrew, and we became a smuggling, family of Bibles. And so that's a whole other thread that we would smuggle Bibles into the former Soviet Union and China. And for a young girl, stuffing her Hello Kitty suitcase with children's Bibles and handing them over to people crying and going, wow, this must mean something. Like
Right.
they kept calling it bread. And I was like, what, but I think it's, sort of like rooted in something in me about, well, I think maybe it's about courage.
Mm,
My every time we did it, we were like, are we gonna get arrested? What's happening? And my dad, I think that sort of missionary mindset, and I know missionary has it as a hard context for people in that way. But what I mean is in that time, for my dad, it was, we need to get Bibles into the hands of people. So, the family participated. So it was very rich. And when I came to Canada in, mid 80s, it was a different Canada, especially where we landed. We landed in outside of Toronto and in Mississauga, and the area that we landed in and lived was predominantly, a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, all Caucasians. And so when I arrived, it was a shock, not only the cold, but I was only like one of two kids in my grade 8 class that were of color.
wow.
And the assumption when I moved in with my parents, and I overheard neighbors say this, is that your housekeeper? Is that your maid? Is she your caregiver? Again, with, sort of the stereotype of Filipinos, all Filipinos being that. And, my parents were struggling with that too, because that was what an assumption. And for somebody to so boldly say those things, and I would overhear that. And I think, Jonathan, at that age, I was 13, even though I had this rich heritage of my faith. And, it was difficult when I come into a country and at that time, nothing represented me. No Filipino was on magazines or really on TV within culture. There was no one like me within my school. Even in my high school, I think there was 5 of us. I mean, we had, 2 Black guys, a Chinese girl, me, and, I think like a East Indian boy. Like, I mean, 5. And
Right.
so it was very difficult. And it was difficult when people made presumptions and assumptions about me without even knowing me. I mean, people would literally say to my face, like, oh, you don't have an accent. Or they would go, do you speak English? Now, I went to private schools in America. I was at Singapore American schools. I was learning 4 languages. I was getting, letters from Ronald Reagan at the time saying you had the highest score in all of like our, grade 4. Like it was nuts. And then I come to Canada, and based on color, they made these assumptions. And I will say this, I got to grade 8 and they wanted to boost me to grade 9 because my education level was so high. But people were just still like, do you eat Chinese food? I'm like, I'm Filipino. I eat everything. Like, I mean, and I, and it was so difficult in that though, Jonathan, it was difficult because what happened was, the lies started rooting in my mind. You're not
Sure.
good enough. You're not accepted. And so in that, and that's why I talk to a lot of, young women, when those lies get rooted, when I didn't share it with anybody or my family, uh, they become bigger lies and fester. And so because you don't like yourself and because you're feeling isolated, then you work really hard to be accepted. So, you know, drugs and alcohol, promiscuity, attention seeking, the way I dressed, what I did, fake ID, went down to Toronto to one of those head shops on Yonge Street and got fake ID from the sketchiest guy, started going to clubs at 17, it was nuts. And I will say, and I say this too, uh, if it wasn't for my parents on their knees every night, literally praying and calling heaven down to protect me, I also don't know where I would be today. And when I do speak, I say to parents, like, come on, like your kid could be way out, but you got to be praying, and it might not be, you pray for somebody else to get through to your kid. And my parents prayed because I would go out every night clubbing. And Jonathan, I'll say, there were situations that could have been far worse for me as a woman. And there were some really tough situations, but even worse. And I would hear loud voices at the club. I'd be dancing to house music, at the club, and I would hear a
You
voice.
do know I'm a house and trance DJ,
Oh
right?
my gosh, really?
So
I was
much love,
music
much
all
love.
night long. And I had the house pants. I was like, I honestly, they would throw me up on stage and we'd lead oh, what a time. I mean, it really was. I mean, that was electric circus time for us in Canada. I was full in downtown. And so I was in that world. And, I think part of it was because I thought the church was boring and I wanted to, I'm a kind of party girl, fun girl. So I wanted that escape and entertainment. But there are times, Jonathan, that I would be walking towards a room or something. And I'm not kidding. I would literally, through the house music, hear a voice saying, don't go in there. There's something better for you. It was like God would not leave me alone. Like I could not get rid of him. He was like clinging on to me. It was wild. And there are times where that voice saved me. I would hear stuff in the news the next day about the club I was in that something happened. And I was literally walking towards it. And then I would like detour and take a cab home because it was wild. And my parents would tell me they had bruised knees because they prayed. And I tell parents all the time, don't give up. Like your kid could be 50, 40, 30, 19. Just don't give up on praying. And my parents would say, they would start praying that somebody else would get through to me. And I would. There would be people coming up to me and random, and they would be drunk and they'd say, you're a hypocrite. I'm like, what? And I'm dancing and they're like, you're a hypocrite. I'm like, where is this coming from? And they would say things like, yeah, I think we know that you go to church or whatever, but you're being here and I'm dressed like that's a hypocrite. And they'd walk away. And I was like, where did that come from?
That's so weird.
No, where did that come from? But it's like, is that the way God works? I think so. I mean, there's creative ways he uses strange situations and people. I've witnessed that my entire life. But it was really at the end of the day, I didn't like myself. I was trying to escape. And I've seen that with women. Like I wanted to lose myself in, with men drinking, clubbing so that I didn't have to face me.
Sure.
And what I felt that I wasn't enough, that I didn't belong, that I wasn't accepted. And, that's hard stuff for women. I mean, even now, a lot of my girlfriends as Gen Xers, we still battle that deep insecurity of identity and belonging and who we are. And we spout out, I am God's beloved and he's created by me, but there's still, we have to work hard in our minds to not go there and believe it, because it's so, it can saturate you. And yet, I mean, through the years, I've, worked through a lot of that. And I think it really took great people and community, my parents, to stick with me, to love me through the messy, hard stuff. It hasn't been an easy life. I, through that had, a really difficult abusive boyfriend that really triggered off some things, relationships, and then went through a very, difficult depression for 8 months that changed my life and changed the course of my life. And so it hasn't been easy, but I think what really got me through some of those really hard things in my prodigal years was that people didn't give up on me. And I say
Mm.
this to people, it's hard. It sucks going through relationship with people that just don't want to listen or want to run away or are angry. But I'm telling you, I'm here today, Jonathan, because people stuck with me. People loved me unconditionally, as hard as it was. They really dug in and loved me unconditionally and stayed with me. And I would say that's another part of why I'm here.
Mm. That's so beautiful. Obviously, not everybody has had that,
No.
right? Not everybody experienced that kind of love, and in some cases, maybe. I mean, I think it is easy to become fixated on the outward rebellious behavior. But it sounds like people really understood with you. They
Yeah.
understood the heart. They understood the trauma, the pain, right? That
Mm.
this is all symptomatic
Yes.
of a
And
deeper
yes.
thing.
I'm glad you're saying that. And you know what? It's crazy the different things that brought me slowly back. I had a friend who is one of my longest friends, Paul, and it makes me emotional too. We've been friends for 32 years. I met him when I was 14 or 13, and longest friend. And he was part of my youth group, and he wouldn't give up on me. And he annoyed me. He was one of those like geeky pastor type that just saw in you potential and would not let you go. And so I always say to pastors, like, stick with some of your kids. They may annoy you. And he would be frustrated with me. And I would run away from home. I'm not kidding. My mom would call him, go, can you find Melinda? And but I remember one day when I ran away from home and my mom called him, said we have no idea where she was. And for me, again, rebellion. I just jumped out of the second floor window, which was stupid, almost broke my legs just to because my parents wouldn't let me go to a party. And I'm running through the suburbs of Mississauga with nowhere to go. It was ridiculous. And he drove up and he found me. And I was like, great. He's gonna like land base me and say something. And at the time it was cassettes.
Yes.
And I sit in and he goes, I want you to hear something. And he puts in this cassette and it's Stephen Curtis Chapman's a Christian worship leader guy. And the song was, and it makes me cry every time, Jonathan, don't let the fire die. I can still see the spark of his love in your eye. Don't let the fire die.
Mm.
And I'm sitting listening to him run away. I'm a mess. I've sort of given myself away. I don't care. And I'm listening to a song that don't let the fire die, that we still see that something in you. And which was, here's the thing, it was hope. It was affirming that there was still good in me, even when I made really lousy and bad decisions. And then I looked at him after he played it and I said, is there something you want to say? He goes, nope, I'm just going to drive you home. And I remember that moment. And I say this too to people, like sometimes you don't need to talk and try to convince me. Sometimes it's just listening and sometimes it's a song. And I think that is where us in community have to be just really diligent and thoughtful and wise on how we approach people and how we do things. It's not always like us trying to tell people what to do and how it should be and how they should be. I wouldn't have needed that. It was a song reminding me of the goodness in me that God hadn't forgotten. Wow, I'm emotional on this podcast because I remember that moment. And that was a key moment. So when I got to meet Stephen Curtis Chapman many years later up for the show,
Come on.
I told him that. And I saw him, I said, have to tell you this. And he's like, this is the kind of thing. And again, it's this whole beautiful way God works because I mean, Stephen plays that song for thousands of people, but he goes, it's good to hear that because sometimes you just need to hear about how it changed the one. And so that also was a learning for me because I put out media to the world. And yet, you know, God has really said, but it's the one. You know, if you don't get one like or 1,000 likes, but you get one like because that person watched the show and it made a difference, then that person is worth it because that's God's heart for the one. So that was a really big turning point for me, which sort of kind of like changed a little bit of, you know, where I was headed. So thanks, Stephen Curtis Chapman. Shout out to you. Thanks, Paul. And thanks to my family, my mom and dad, I put them really through the ringer. It was really difficult. And I think when I told you about the adoption, I'd really put them through a very difficult time. So when my dad looked at Dory, my adopted mom, and said, thank you for giving us the most wonderful daughter.
Mm.
In knowing all the pain and crap I'd given them,
Of course, because
It
you're
was,
30 at this point.
yes,
Yeah, wow.
it was a moment of redemption
Whew.
and healing and mercy for my dad to speak that to her, to affirm that no matter what I had done, I was still their daughter and they still love me and I was a wonderful daughter. And I think for a father, for men listening, I know a lot of women listen to your show, but I have talked to a lot of men to say the importance of loving your daughter and your kids is life changing. Like
Hmm.
it is. I think also my mom is a really big part, but my dad as a man in my life to affirm to me and not discount or be angry also changed me. There's a lot of people who've changed me, but that's what I'm saying. It's like all these parts of people who make good decisions, even in their own brokenness, has ensured that I'm continuing in the work that I'm doing, that I'm here today, that I'm alive today and I'm here.
Yes.
So, yeah, father's love is big too. There's a
Come on.
lot of themes, Jonathan.
I love it. I love it. I mean, this is just so beautiful. I know what you mean about the one, right? Like
Mhm.
we do this work in media and we try not to care except for the things we know we're meant to care about. But
Yes.
it's like your job is literally to be presentable and operate within this weird system. And then somebody says, like, I got this letter a couple of weeks ago that was like, I've been a believer for 30 years and I've read the first chapter of your book and I've just begun to realize that God loves me.
Mm,
And
wow.
like on the one hand, I'm like, man, what was your Christian life? Like, what? Why bother? but I'm like, man, for somebody to know they're loved,
Yeah.
which again, I think at your book launch, I was like, oh, here's a kindred spirit for
Mm.
someone to know that God sees them, that God knows them, that God knows all the horrific choices they've made and the self-destructive things that they ended up doing, which they probably didn't realize were going to be all this stuff. And he just looks at us with eyes of love.
Isn't that beautiful? I've felt the eyes of love on me, and sometimes I've said I don't want it because I feel so gross and dirty, but it just keeps coming. And in in that relationship I have with him, but also again with people. That's why I say people. Enough with the anger and judgment, and especially when I'm speaking to women's conferences and sort of adult conferences and not my youth ones. It's like what you say and do matters. Like what you don't do will change, a youth's life. What you do will change. Like how you respond in the way, is it anger or sending them out of the house because you don't agree with this or that, like that those decisions will alter, a kid's life forever, will alter not just kids, but generations. And so I think that's really important to know. So I say that to a lot of like adults, like pray, your choices and words matter. And in any way that you can, loving unconditionally. It's hard. We say it very cliche in a way, but it changes. It changes people. So, I think that's sort of been the thread. And, especially when
We'll take a quick break to thank all of my Patreon supporters. This show is made possible by my monthly and annual supporters on patreon.com. Huge shout out to Debbie, Kevin, Brianna, and Darcy for joining most recently. That brings me almost to my goal of 70 patrons. I literally need one more person, I think I'm at 69, to come on at either $3 a month or $32 a year. That will get me to my target of 70, which means I can start providing transcribed audio of every episode. So if you'd like to help support the show and my other writing, everything that I'm doing, you can go to patreon.com/Jonathan Puddle. You'll gain access to a bunch of exclusive supporter-only content, including the B-Side, which is a weekly show where I sit down and debrief the most recent episodes with my friends. So thank you to everyone who supports the show or just shares it with everyone. You're amazing. You make this possible. Thank you. Let's get back to Melinda.
yeah, I'm just going to jump to sort of the depression part, so I go through all of this and I'm like, okay, God, I'm following you and, have a really great career. And then just a lot of difficult things happen, not difficult, but, ended up breaking up with a man I thought I was going to marry. I get hit by a transport truck. I have a really difficult boss that's really causing me a lot of pain. And in that, I find my birth mother, which is a good thing, but there was a lot of stuff.
Of course.
And I go through this crazy depression. Like, it was so dark and deep, and wow, for 8 months, like I couldn't get out of bed. People thought I died. Like, they literally were like asking my like kind of landlord at the time in my condo, like, can you open the door? And it was like something just like I couldn't handle it. And I remember the struggle, especially, and I've heard this a lot with other people struggling with that. It's like, you've got God's spirit, he's taking you out of a bad situation. You've got all the promises of God, and then you go into this like deep depression. And so there's a lot of guilt and shame associated with that, because I'm like, wait a second, I follow Jesus. I talk about God's spirit of power, love, and a sound mind. Well, clearly I don't have a sound mind. I'm not feeling powerful. I'm not loving myself and have no capacity to love others. And here I am. And it was dark. Like, I can't even remember days. I just remember fetal positions. And here I am, like, I'm speaking at this time, Jonathan. I'm like in ministry. I'm in this organization, big organization on advocacy, and speaking to thousands of kids across Canada about giving to the poor. And I am literally out and had to take a leave, and I was out. And just trying to wrestle with it. And again, the only way I got through that was a really great therapist, a great doctor, and community. But it was difficult. And in that, I realized, for me, what they call kind of like a situational depression, which I have to be aware of even today, that when things overwhelm me and I have all of these things happening in my head, my tendency would be just to kind of like shut down. Mm-hmm. And so I'm aware of those signs. And I talk about that too when I do speak, that, I have to be aware of those signs and ensure, well, okay, could be going there, being overwhelmed, could go there. And then what do I have in place? But that was a really interesting time for me. And just wrestling with God through that. It's very hard. And then, thankful family came and literally threw me into the shower and said, we're going to help you get through this. But
I think it's a shame that so much of the church culture of this period, especially Pentecostal culture, did not equip us for real suffering and mental challenge. Like you said, we have scripture, we have the power and the promises.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why I think also why we do so many mental health and mental illness shows on my show on See Hear Love, because I remember that on and off the experience, but what that did to me. And then and when I first shared that publicly, I hadn't. And when I started speaking, I did bring that story. The thousands of women and men who said, thank you for being honest, because it looks like you've got this great life and you've kind of come through. And then you're like, and then you get depressed and you're out, And I realized that, wow, the church, and we don't talk about it in healthy, loving ways. We haven't equipped, the church to be able to love and handle and sit with people who are struggling, the words, processes, things. Right. And so here's the thing about story, if I can say this, it's like every time I would share something that was really personal. And I remember wrestling with God saying, I don't want to talk about like when I attempted suicide at 16, or when I had to flee my abusive boyfriend, or, the decisions that I've made at the club, or now my depression. And I remember would wrestle with God about sharing that. And the first time I said it on stage, it was a women's conference, and I was shaking. I was terrified because I'm like, judgment. Because here's the thing, for anybody who's in media or on a platform, anytime you share something, you're like, oh, and you're trying to like grab it back, shoot, because you're like, okay, are people going to judge me? What are people going to see? But as I've journaled and prayed and talked with God, it's like, that's not your problem. Like your responsibility is not to manage people's responses and stuff, right? Mm-hmm. Your responsibility is to tell the truth, to be a truth giver, to share the truth of your own story, and also my own character, Melinda, as I talk to God of these talks with him. So when I shared depression, I was like, oh, now people are going to be judging me because I'm not a strong Christian. I have a weak mind, blah, whatever. And the first time I did it, Jonathan, it was like, oh, like women lined up for prayer and think, thank you. And I've struggled with depression for years, or I still am in it. And my kid is in it. My husband is in it. It's impacting our marriage, like over and over. And then I realized this is an important topic to discuss. Yeah. Nothing to be ashamed about, something to be honest about, but how do we in community help one another? What do we do? And being very honest, like I saw, a therapist. I was on medication for a little bit. I saw a great doctor. I had a great community. I had to choose in the fogginess of my mind. I had to, in it, kind of find my way to say, is this how I want to be and live forever? And I mean, and that's my own personal experience. I'm very aware of other people's, experiences, but that was a big one. And I think that learning was, not to kind of like cast pearls before swine in that way. I don't want to say things to just get more likes or to get more opportunities to speak. But I believe that as I've been journeying in my life, God's been like, these are important things. I'll give you the courage. Do it. I'm with you. And do it because it will bring healing and connection with people who feel very isolated and alone. So I do it. It's not always the most comfortable. It's not always like easy, but that's not life. Life isn't that. I think life is about, ensuring people know they're loved, that, people are there for them, that God is with them. And if I can ensure that promise and truth to people by sharing my own story, then let's do it. Let's go.
So good. Again, okay. I think I'm like, let's get real coffee in person one day when we're allowed to do things like that again.
Yeah.
I can identify with so much of that importance of that vulnerability and what it does for other people, right? Like, I think in social media, even we've gotten like vulnerability means oversharing, but that's not what it means. Like vulnerability is an undefended state, right? Which means vulnerability is an open door. And if it's an open door, then other people can walk through it. Yeah. And so they get out of their prisons too, because of our willingness to, and your willingness to be open. And then, and like, it's
big. I mean, and I'll share one more. I mean, I could talk to you for another 2 hours, but I think that was a big one for me about depression. But I think the biggest was when I was going through my divorce. And this is like a topic unto itself. But I'm now on national TV on a women's show, the first Christian women's talk show called Full Circle in Canada. It was part of 100 Huntley Street, which was the longest running daily talk show in Canada. And I was asked to be a co-host. So I was on for 7 years. And during that time, I married, a man from my church. And he was actually on the show. And, here it was. And living the, the dream of both of us working, living in a great home in Oakville, Ontario. And it wasn't easy. I mean, this is the fascinating, interesting part of it is that, I'm sitting listening to the top marriage experts on the show every week, and I'm having real difficulty in my marriage. And, you don't want to share about that because here you are in ministry. You're the person who's speaking truth and giving people, encouragement. And, even though I'm like, I've come on this journey and it's about vulnerability and community and I'm in that, we weren't honest about our own marriage and it was tough and we were having a hard time. But I will say, I never thought that it would end. I thought we'd find a way to get through it. And one day he decides and he looks at me and says, I don't want to be married anymore. Now, I think in the trigger of that, Jonathan, I've been through senses of abandonment and rejection from my own self, from other people. And to hear those words, it was like, I'm not good enough. Here we go again, right from 13 when I arrived in Canada, not good enough, not measure up, don't belong, rejected. And there is my husband who I made, this covenant to, who says I don't want to be married. In that, I'm also in ministry. And very we were on, national television People, when we would go to the restaurants, people would stop me and my, husband at the time. Like, it was crazy. So here I am now confronted with, I'm rejected and now I'm going to be abandoned because he left the house a few weeks later. I'm not good enough. And how do I message this to a predominantly evangelical community of viewers?
So which one of you had an affair?
Exactly. Right. Like,
Right.
how did this happen? What was the purpose? What happened? So kept it secret. And then a good friend of mine, which I love good friends. That's why I've now surrounded myself. She said to me, like, you need to tell your show because, it's going to get out that people might not see you and with him anymore. So I remember thinking, Jonathan, okay, I'm in the largest evangelical Christian media production with a very well-known lead CEO and speaker who tend to be more conservative. Oh my gosh, what is going to happen to me? And I remember that moment, like, I was terrified. I was shaking. And I remember going, this is it. Like, this is it. My job is over. I'm out and I'm not going to be in ministry anymore. And I remember going to, and I will say them, like Ron and Ann Maines, who, lots of people love and some people don't understand because, they're not like them. And I made a judgment on them, which is another part, and that will be another part of our podcast one day. Made a judgment on these people. And I went to them and I said, he doesn't want to be married anymore. He's left me. So basically, I know what's happening. I know what's going to happen. And I remember Anne looking at me and saying, oh my gosh, Mel, with such great love and mercy, and saying, we will not shoot our wounded. You will still stay on the show and you will still stay in our ministry. And we will go to the top on your behalf. We will advocate for you to be with us. Now, think about that. Like, I made a judgment. I was ready because I felt I deserved it. Here I am, Christian ministry, a face to Christian ministry, listening to the Gary Smalleys and all the top guys on marriage. And my marriage is completely in shatters. And when she said that, I just broke down crying. I was like, I'm sorry. And she's like, we'll be an advocate. We won't shoot you while you're down. We're going to help restore you. Now, they said, we're also going to pray that your marriage is restored. But it was more the fact that there was somebody who said, we'll be on your behalf, speak for you, advocate for you. And we know your heart, Mel, even though the situation could be very messy and there'd be a lot of like negativity about this, especially for a Christian ministry, we'll have your back. That also changed me, because when you have people that will stand for you and risk even their own jobs and reputation for defending you, that changes everything too. It means that you're not alone, that people see that you are valued, that your voice is still needed. And even when this situation occurs, people will be with you. And I remember that moment changed everything. And fast forward a few months later, they asked me to go public with it. So I have a lawyer, I have my pastor, I have my friends reading through my teleprompter script when I announced literally to Canada that I am going through a separation and divorce. I will never forget that moment, reading that off on a teleprompter across Canada, knowing what could happen, what people would say, people would assume and judge, make up stories. I remember looking right to camera, Jonathan, and sharing it.
Were you present or were you like totally outside of your body?
I don't know. I can't remember. I just remember Anne, the host, saying, now Melinda wants to share a really important update with her life, something like that. And I just look right to camera and teleprompter in the studio, bright lights, the girls on the show holding my hand. I'm shaking. And I say it. And I just say, I share the verse about that, God's love is wide and deep and you can't escape it. And then I shared. And the very end of it, it gives me chills to this day. I finish and I feel the weight of what's going to happen next on the phone lines, emails to our president. And I remember it going quiet. They were like, it's a wrap. And this lone cameraman just goes. I'll never forget it. And all of a sudden, all the production teams start clapping. People came down from their offices to the studio and literally embraced me. Again, a beautiful picture of when people put aside judgments, put aside that, and show mercy and love. It was the most powerful thing the studio I've ever experienced in my life. It was just like this supernatural experience of God's love just flooding. What was even more supernatural is we didn't get any negative calls in. When that went live on, literally it was on global television. It was on Yes TV. It went online. I actually had to take it down because there was thousands of hits on it. Whenever somebody Googled my name, the divorce would come up. So I was like, take it down. So finally we took it down because people just kept watching it over and over again. What happened though, Jonathan, was I expected negativity and judgment. And instead I got bags of mail for months from people across Canada in ministry, everyday people, pastors, who wrote me, emailed me, phoned in to say, thank you. For you to speak that gave me courage to share my story. For you to speak that gave me courage to stand up and say, that's not right. And I read stories of unbelievable, painful divorces and separations that like I would be on the floor in my office, like bawling. There are people that people knew that are well known in ministry and pastors who confidentially said to me, my, wife and my husband are going through a very difficult time and we're at this place. We've never told anybody. I'm telling you. Who was your counselor? What are you doing? And so I was able to help in very practical ways. In that, though, what happened was it opened up the show. It opened up me to be, I think, more honest, to be, again, not in a way to attract more fans and viewers. But what I saw in that was, again, God, like I remember hearing like God was with me in it. I mean, terrified, but what it did was I saw healing in a country in Canada that needed it, in the place of divorce where nobody wanted to talk about it. Nobody, and it's pretty crazy because my dad now at his age goes, the country and church has come a long way in this area, because they would never, churches when he was growing up would never have a divorced woman at the pulpit speaking ever.
Oh, sure.
That would be like, and now it's like, speak all the time. I've got a Christian show on, on TV, and I am divorced. And so that was a huge turning point for my life too, which really, I think, set a bit of the foundation for See, Hear, Love. All of these, and I think, as I look back right now, it's like all of these experiences really set me up for what I'm doing. Because, if I hadn't gone through these things or shared or seen the outpouring or gone through hard stuff, could I talk in an authentic and honest way now with my show? I don't think so, Jonathan. I don't think so. So that moment in broadcast television, Christian television, I mean, people still tell me that. I watched it, Melinda. I watched it in the morning. I watched it at night. I watched it online. I couldn't believe you said that. But I can't believe I said it either. But it brought a lot of healing for so many of myself, and then opened up, I think, for the organization I'm part of now, and also other, sort of women's groups, about being authentic. Like we hadn't really talked about authenticity back then, and like honesty and transparency in Christian media or Christian, messaging. We were always trying to front that everything was okay. And I think that was a breakthrough, not only for me, but, for many people. So yeah, that was that experience that really kind of, I think, set the course for, again, why I do what I do today.
Yeah. Wow. And your book is called Always Know.
Yeah.
And what I keep hearing you say, in the show and elsewhere, is always know that you are seen, heard, and loved by God. And I figured that you had receipts. But I'm really glad that you that you shared them with us.
Yeah, I think, again, part of the story and why I share is that, we all have these receipts and story. And I think, this book, Always Know, is there's so much. I've always been about wanting to sort of amplify voices. I've always been, as obviously to ensure that, young women's voices of different ethnicities and experiences are seen, heard, and loved and shared, because it's not been easy. That's another part of my story. It's not been easy being a Filipino woman in Christian ministry. I mean, again, I'm thankful for so many men and women, but actually men who advocated for me, from presidents of organizations to pastors who risked their jobs for having me preach at the pulpit
Mm.
in a conservative church, where they said, but you need to share this and we will stand with you. And, being brought to the board because I spoke, because women are not supposed to speak. It hasn't been easy, and it hasn't been easy because it's me. Like what you're saying is, because I am a young woman with brown skin, I am disqualified. I am not able to do this X. And I know that flows into other people groups as well. And I think also that's why I have such a soft heart for that, and ensuring inclusion within my husband and my world of friends and community, but also within the show, because it's been very, very hard. And to have people assume things about you, or you're like, but I can't change this.
Right.
But you're making a judgment call and closing a door on me because of this, because of me, because of my Black hair and my Filipino skin and my gender. Are you kidding me? Like, what? And so I understand that pain for many people today. So I think, the book, the show, that's all about that, this book, Always Know, is a celebration of voices and experiences and diversity and truths and wisdom from so many 50 different people, because that's how we learn, is when we share our story and we listen and we lean in and we take it in and say, what can I learn? What is something that I can do? And so, I'm so thankful, Jonathan, that you're in the book. I think the unique part of the book is that it's connected to an episode that everybody has been on, which people are like, that's wild. But every blog post is connected to a show. So when they read your post, it's like, oh, I can actually watch him too. And
As a white male, I feel incredibly blessed and privileged to be incled
I'm
in
so glad. Well, we
these
needed
diverse women, Canadian voices.
we needed
and
just
me.
one white guy to make it, to kind of like round it out with everybody else.
I mean, I wasn't born in Canada. I've naturalized as a Canadian, so
Okay.
I understand. Again, we've been through this journey. We both know what it's like.
I love that. And I think too, just like the show and like my life, after every blog, there's a, kind of reflection and takeaway, just because I think everybody, somebody who's high output for me and extroverted, I've had to really work in my life, the pause and ponder, the reflection and takeaway. It's always important we go through life so quickly and we never take time to pause and go, whoa, that was good. Or what did I learn in that movie, in that song, in that experience, in interaction with somebody? We just keep going. And yet there's richness in like doing the pause, the reflection, to say, whoa, what did that mean to me? What struck me? Why did my heart go, what is that? And then I'm always big on just like the show, the takeaway. Like you cannot go about life and just go, oh, that's great learnings, and not have an action, decide to do something about it, make your life better, make somebody else's life better, do something for the good of the world. So that's really beautiful. And I'm really proud of this book. Everybody's like, you got to write your own story, which I'm hoping to do one day. But this is another part of me that I love. And so it was an honor to do it, curate all the blogs, put this together, and make sure it goes out to the world. So, your voice, Jonathan, and others can be heard. So that's why Always Know. Right? Always Know ... That was the title. So I wanted to make sure people got it. Like, always know you're seen, heard, and loved.
So good.
Mhm.
So good. And may I say, the takeaway and reflection that you or someone on your team wrote for my piece were perfect. I was like, oh, I don't think I wrote this, but this is lovely. This is like, you know, this is exactly what I would have said. So well done.
Good.
Where can folks find the book, Melinda?
Right. So I always like to people to go to our website, seehearlove.com. And then if you know, / always know, it goes right to the book. But you can also pick it up now on Amazon and buy it through Amazon. But I think it'd be great for your listeners to come onto the website because it has blogs and bios and resources to really help you on your journey of life. And what's great about when you go, seehearlove.com / always know, you can actually click on the episodes of each guest. There's really cool downloads and a whole bunch of stuff. So that's where you can get the book. And yeah, I've been hearing, Jonathan, too, a lot of people are getting the book for their women's group, for their youth group. And I think people caught on my kindness kind of like campaign a little bit, personal one, on buying the book and actually mailing it out and dropping it off for people that need some encouragement today. Because they're easy reads, right? I mean, they're
Yeah,
a
for
page
sure.
and a half,
Totally.
not
Very
long
short.
reading, so it's short. So yeah, I'm just hoping that more people, get it, more for the encouragement of people, especially in the middle of a pandemic and crisis. And we can't read long for some people. It's just short little stories that will help you, in your journey. So that's why we have some really great themes. And again, like you said, all of these themes connect with my life personally too. So
Yeah.
mhm.
Thank you for sharing all this. This has been just so wonderful to get to know you better and to have some time together. I'm thinking for folks who are listening in and they can see themselves in a lot of your story, but they may not have had the praying parent or the community that pushed them in the shower and said, okay, you can live again. I wonder if you would pray for those folks for their particular position.
Mm, absolutely. Yes. So God, we breathe in your peace and we breathe in your love and we breathe in your joy and we're thankful for you. And I pray for the listener who is desperately struggling today, who is alone and confused, who is sad and angry, who is at loss, who is struggling with depression, who feels isolated or abandoned and rejected, who has lost their dreams for their future, who feels hopeless. God, I pray that after this conversation and right now, with the sharing of my story, but really your story, God, that they would know deeply that they are seen, heard, and loved by you, that they would sense your presence with them right now, that some part of the story and the truth of who you are, God, would stick, and there'd be something there where they would call out to you, ask for your help, ask for assurance that they will get through another day. I also ask God that you would bring people in their life that will support and love them, the most random person or the closest person to them, that they would have courage to reach out, to share what they're going through, that they would have the courage to find somebody that can help them, a community. God, I pray for the church in Canada, us, that we would also be attuned to the needs of people around us in our neighborhood, that we would reach out and serve, that we wouldn't go through our busy days just so busy, but make margins and time to listen to you and to be led by you to the people that need your love. God, I pray for parents who are discouraged and stressed out about their kids, young and old, that they would get down on their knees and continue to pray for them, that they would show mercy and unconditional love, even when it's hard or you don't agree, but they would extend love and grace. I pray for the young people who have stepped away, like me as a prodigal, that you're never too far away from God. That's the truth. that God is always present, always wooing, always there. And so stop trying to control your life and run away. But that the best place to be is in relationship with him. And I pray for Jonathan, that you would continue to give him great influence in the place of story and learning, that he would continue to listen deeply, lean in, continue to amplify diverse voices so that we can learn and grow together. Pray for his family and for just the work that you have him doing. And so I thank you for this time. I thank you, God, for just being a good and patient father when a lot of us, our fathers, weren't great, that you are that father. I thank you, Jesus, for your life and showing us how to live and love the least of these, the marginalized, oppressed, how you suffered greatly in your life because of your love for us. And so I thank you for your life. And Holy Spirit, thank you that you lead and guide us and speak to us each day. Help us be attuned to you even more. So I thank you for this sacred time together. Thank you for this moment to share story and to pause and to reflect on your faithfulness and goodness to us. And so we commit all these things in your strong name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Melinda. That was such a special time. We were both just sitting there with tears flowing down our faces. Maybe you were too. If you want to know more about Melinda, go hit the show notes. You'll find links to her book, Always Know, and to learn more about Melinda and where you can watch her show, See Her Love. Last week's B-side was very exciting. We talked about the great sex rescue, my wife and some friends of ours, and they shared about years of painful sex. Our good friend, suffers from vaginismus, and so much of the books they read and the evangelical church programming they received, they really believe screwed them up big time. And so they have come to a place of really wonderful healing as well. So if you want to hear their story and if you want to listen to the B-side, you'll need to become a patron. There's a wonderful comment here from Cheryl on last week's B-side. I thoroughly enjoyed this. Laughed, cried, laughed some more. So refreshing to hear this kind of open discussion amongst Christian friends. And then Angela wrote in, such a good point about youth leaders being single males who haven't got a redemptive sexual ethic yet. Yeah, that one just came to me, in the moment. So there will be a B-side for this episode with Melinda. That'll be on Patreon in the next few days. If you want to listen in, patreon.com/JonathanPuddle. Thanks for being here, my friends. Grace and peace to you. Have a great